Okay, so I don't know what to call this, but I feel like it should be called two like meta halachic approaches to psak. Okay, so the background for those who weren't there is that we did a Q&A panel at the In Shabbos on this past Shabbos, and one of the questions asked to Rav Pesach was about people giving psak or hora on their own, just based on their own learning of the sugyos. And then within that discussion, someone asked about pasking out of the Mishneh Torah. And the response that Rav Pesach gave was, no, don't paskin. Well, paskin about the paskin for yourself was a much more involved discussion, but the answer to paskin out of the Mishneh Torah was no. And when someone asked what is the difference between the Mishneh Torah and any other halacha sefer, Rav Pesach said, or like, how do you draw the line? Like between, he was giving examples of Mishnah Berurah and Aruch on the one hand, and like the Rambam on the other hand. So someone said, like, where do you draw the line? And Rav Pesach said that, you know, it has to be someone who's involved in the same process of hora as we do. Okay. And what I wanted to do is like flesh out what that means. And I think it actually there is actually, I think, a real machlokas Rishonim on this issue. Yeah.
Don't we in Yeshiva follow the Rambam, whereas a lot of people wouldn't follow the Rambam, and they follow.
I think that's a rumor. Yeah, it's not actually true. I think the full form of the rumor is yes, we only follow the Rambam, or we paskin out of the Rambam. So first of all, most Jews paskin based on the Rambam because the vast majority of psak in the Shulchan Aruch is verbatim Rambam. You know, so that's one thing. I think the reason we have the rumor is because we're a brisker yeshiva. And the Soloveitchiks have many, I mean, Rav Chaim wrote his book on the Rambam, you know, and there are chidushim on the Rambam that do result in like, you know, chumras that we follow, you know, and if you want to know them, go to Nefesh Harav, Mipnei Harav, and Divrei Harav, and they're all there. Yeah.
I also feel like, what is there anything you're talking about? Or like, what do we think outside of what do you think you're talking about specific?
Sorry, say that again.
Outside of tefillah, you're mentioning chumras that Yeshiva fall. Are you mentioning chumras Yeshiva fall? So you're saying like, are there any outside of tefillah?
Yeah, they're all out. Yeah.
Like what?
Chatzi l'shem, chatzi l'chem. You know, other things. I don't know. I mean, we can go through a list at some other point. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, I think that's where it comes from. Okay, so I know we've read this like a bajillion times, but I just want to actually show. We've never done the other shita. So the Rambam in the hakdamah to the sefer mitzvos, when he writes this is what we call the secret hakdamah to the Mishneh Torah, because he really wanted to write the Mishneh Torah and then realized that he couldn't without first like justifying himself in many ways. So he wrote his real hakdamah to the Mishneh Torah, his first hakdamah to the Mishneh Torah in the sefer mitzvos, in the hakdamah to the sefer mitzvos, and he says the whole plan of what he wants to do in the Mishneh Torah. Then he wrote the Mishneh Torah later. Okay, so one paragraph. This is where the Rambam's position on paskening from the Mishneh Torah. Okay, so he says ve'echlol bo. So he's talking about the Mishneh Torah he hasn't written yet. I will include in it kol mash niskayim v'nisbar midivrei Torah, everything that has been established and clarified from the words of Torah. Ad shelo timale shum she'ela shetzrichim la shelo azkirena, to the point where there is no question that is necessary to answer that I will not mention. O azkir yesod shemimenu tilamet osa ha'she'ela bekalus bli iyun rachok. That's the phrase. Or he says either he will answer the question directly or he'll give you the foundation from which you can learn the answer to the question easily without intense analysis. Okay, which means, again, he'll tell you all the answers or you can figure it out on your own without like in-depth analysis. Okay. Matarasi bo gam hakitzur ima shlemus. My goal here is brevity with completeness. To the point where the reader who reads it, that it'll encompass everything that is found in the Mishnah, Talmud, sefer, Tosefta, and everything that the Gaonim, the later Gaonim fenced in or set up. All the dinim. Okay, the sum of the matter, the point where you will not need any other book to learn from it anything that you will need in the entire Torah, okay, whether deraisa or derabanan. Now, again, common Yeah. I don't have books.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if there are
No?
copies left. But you can look on the screen if you want. Yeah. And this stuff is not in there anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the common mistake when the people quote the Rambam saying that he wanted to like replace the Gemara, he never wanted to replace the Gemara. But what he did want to do is make a standalone book to learn all halacha from. Okay.
It's like if you didn't have time to go to the Gemara, right? That's how.
So he also says it in the hakdamah to the Mishneh Torah more like your way, which is here. Hold on.
This is not like just a more expansive version of like Rosh or Tosfos. Right?
No,
It's like
Rosh and
something
Tosfos
more-
didn't even try to do this. Yeah.
Actually, more cool. I was gonna say more cool to the riff, but I realized it's not as useful.
Yeah. You just want to learn the riff. He says, hold on a second. Yeah. So he says, so in the end of the hakdamah to the Mishneh Torah, he says, V'od chibru. So he's talking about what the Gaonim did. He says, Od chibru halachos psukos b'inyan ha'asar v'amoter v'chayva pater b'dvarim shahashat tzrich lan. So the Gaonim were the first ones to write books of psak halacha. So they did that. So that they could be accessible to the knowledge of someone who cannot descend to the depths of the Talmud. So the way you would get halacha in the olden days is you would learn through the whole sugya and then get the halacha from the Talmud. But the Gaonim had to write these practical halacha books because people couldn't do that. And that's what the Rambam is doing in full form, which wasn't done before him. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Rambam Shita. It is abundantly clear that the Rambam intended for the Mishneh Torah to be relied upon just by reading the answers or figuring it out without any iyun, and you explicitly saying you don't need the Gemara to figure out how to follow the Mishneh Torah. For psak, yeah. To understand, for theoretics, to understand like the rejected shitos, to get chachmas ha-Talmud, to get the perfection of the mind, then you need Gemara for. But for knowing halacha, you don't need anything else. Okay, except Torah B'Ksav, I should say. You need Torah B'Ksav because this is Torah B'Al Peh. But yeah, okay. Now, in contrast, the Rosh, okay, who, spoiler alert, this is who Rav Pesach holds like, okay? I mean, if you ask him, do you hold like the Rosh? He's not going to necessarily know what you're talking about because I think this is the mainstream Shita. It's not like it's the Rosh, but the Rosh is the first one I know of who actually says this. It's in Shalos Uchuvos, Klal Lamed Aleph Siman Tes, okay? I only knew this because it says that in the Chabad footnotes there, really good footnotes. I don't even know this whole thing, but basically someone asked him a question about mikvah. Okay, and they said, and the Rambam says, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so he goes and he shows how this person understood it wrong. And then in the middle of this, he says, V'chein toim kol hamorim horaos mitoch divrei haRambam zal. So too, anyone who paskins psak out of the words of the Rambam is toeh, is in error. Okay, is making a mistake. Okay, why? V'einam bekim b'gemara leda mehechan hotzi devarav. They're not experts in Gemara to know where the Rambam got his words from. Toim, they'll make mistakes. Lahatir ha'asar v'lesor hamotar, to give the wrong psak. Okay, yeah. What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, wasn't the entire idea of the Rambam in writing the Mishneh Torah? It was for the people who couldn't go to the Gemara.
Yeah, but he's saying that anyone who relies on halakha from the Rambam is making a mistake. So he's saying that the Rambam did not succeed in his goal.
I see.
Okay, yeah, and this is going to be very clear. We're going to do one more shita a little bit afterwards. That the Rosh is not explaining or in line with the Rambam. He's disagreeing with the Rambam. He's saying, nice plan, Rambam, but you done goofed. Yeah. According to the Rambam, he did succeed in his goal. Yeah.
What was his goal?
His goal was to make a book of halacha that stands independently, that you don't need anything else, and you can.
The Shulchan
Aruch wanted to make a Rambam. No one had done anything that the Rambam had done like this.
Make psak halacha.
Psak halacha, yeah, right. And also we're going to find for everybody, and we're going to find out that even the Shulchan Aruch didn't want to make this type of Shulchan Aruch that you're talking about, because that's also a misnomer. Yeah, let me just finish the thought that either he's going to answer everything you need practically or give you the foundation that you can figure out from the Mishneh Torah easily what answers to questions that you are without needing any other book. Yeah, Chizkiah?
Did the Rosh disagree or say that he failed? Not or because he disagrees with how his psak or because of something else?
So let's read the rest of the Rosh and then we'll answer that question. Okay, so he says kilo asa. Sorry. Yeah, so in other words, you're not going to know where the Rambam is getting it from, and that's going to cause you to make a mistake in your psak. Okay, kilo asa keshar hamachabrim. The Rambam didn't do like other authors, shehivu rayos l'divrehim, who bring proofs to their statements, beheru al hamakomos hechan divrehim b'gemara, and they show where to find the words in the Gemara. Umitoch zeh yachol lam al ha'ikar v'al ha'emes, and through that you can arrive at the root and at the truth. But the Rambam, I love this phrase. There's so much shade in this. About who kasav sifro kinisnavim mipi agvora. Rambam wrote his book like he was prophesying from God's mouth. Okay, right? Below tam, without giving any reasons, below raya, without giving any proofs. Anyone who reads him thinks that he understands it. The enokain, and it's not true.
That you understand the reader, or
that the reader understands the Rambam. Yeah, that's another important point to make. By the way, the Rosh is never criticizing, saying that the Rambam was in error for his books, for his psak. He's saying that if you read the Rambam, I mean, he does disagree with psak in many cases, but that's not what he's saying here. He's not saying that the Rambam didn't know how to learn. He's saying the Rambam didn't write a book that allows people who don't know how to learn to get halacha from the Mishneh Torah. Yeah, that wasn't his point. Correct. Yeah. That's why I'm saying that the Rosh is saying that the Rambam did not succeed in his goal.
Does he think he has a different goal than what?
No, the Rosh knows exactly what the Rambam's goal is, and he's saying it did not work.
It seems like if the Rambam would have sourced his opinions, then whatever.
Not necessarily. Yeah. So we'll go into this next. I didn't intend to go into this, but we'll go into this a little bit next. We're not going to get to it. No, no, we are. Don't worry. Okay. So about she'im eno baki b'gemara, that if a person is not an expert in Gemara, now here's the key phrase: ein mevin davar la'ashuro ula'amito. He will not understand the matter in a straight manner and in a true manner, the kashel bedin ubahara, and he's going to err in the law and in psak. Lakach, therefore, lo yismach adam al priyaso besifro ladun ulhoros imlo shimtza raya b'gemara. Therefore, a person should not rely on reading the Mishneh Torah to Paskin unless he finds a proof in the Gemara. And then he brings an anecdote, which is not so important, but I'll read it anyway because he thinks it's important. Adam gadol Barcelona. She bucky betlasa sidre. So there's this guy in Barcelona who was a expert in 3 of the Siddharim, right, of Shas. But Amar and this guy said to Mahasi al bnei Adam, I'm astounded by people shelo lamdu Gemara, who don't learn Gemara, v'korim b'sifrei haramim zal umorim b'danim mitok svarav, u'svurim sheyakiru behem, who don't know Gemara and they read the Rambam's books and they paskin out of it and they think that they understand it. Okay. Last sentence. Ki amar ani, ki amar, for I say, this guy who's an expert in 3 Siddharim, ani makir batmi, I know myself. Ki begimu Siddharim shalamarti, ani mevin kishani kore b'sfarav. I who have learned these 3 Siddharim, I understand when I read the Rambam's works. Aval b'sifrei b'sfarav b'hilchos kachim uzraim, eineni mevin behen klum. But when I read the Rambam in Zraim and Kachim, I don't understand anything. Shekachu lahem b'chol sefarav. V'yadati shekachu lahem b'chol sefarav. And that's what I know that these people are experiencing who don't know any Gemara. And then he signs his name, the Rosh. Yeah. So your original question was what again?
Well, I guess my first question was he disagreeing? I think you already answered this on the Rambam's psak or.
Right. So he does disagree with the Rambam's psak, but in this statement, he's saying, like, in other words, I'm assuming he read the Mishneh Torah, so he knows what the Rambam intended to do, and he's saying that it does not work because he's saying you will not be able to understand the psak of the Rambam without the Gemara, and the Rambam would say, yeah, you would. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm confused by is that phrase to paskin out of the Rambam. Do you mean interpret correctly what the Rambam's psak is, or because otherwise I thought the whole idea was that you at least it would be clear to you what he's saying to do, and now or is that
what are you not going to understand?
Yeah, or is it that oh, you're not going to know how it is that he got that paskin?
No, he's saying you're not going to know how you got to it,
but
and
that's okay, right?
Well, no. So then that's the thing, and he's saying because you won't know how the Rambam got to it, then you'll make a mistake in interpreting his words.
That's what I'm confused.
Yeah.
why can't it? Is so he's saying the only way you can understand what he's saying is to know how he got there.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why, again, we're gonna flash forward just briefly. That's why Rav Pesach said, you're not gonna know, like, you don't just rely on the words, you rely on your knowledge of the svara, and that changes your understanding of the words.
So did the Rambam just not anticipate the room for how many ways there were to interpret?
I don't know the answer to this question.
Is that what the
that's we'll read a letter from the Rambam, which makes me think not, but that's what you're asking what the root of this machlokes is,
Yeah,
you know.
like
And so I'm going to give my theory on this in a little while after we do the sources, but we'll see. Yeah, Aaron.
It can't be that the Rosh is referring to like that we're not going to understand like when he paskins that the women aren't chayav in Talmud Torah.
No, right. But let's say, for example, we'll just use a related issue, right? That a person shouldn't teach his daughter Torah, the Torah path, right? The Rambam says that, right? And we saw earlier in the year that like it's not so simple what the Rambam meant, you know, like did he mean that it is usher for, I mean, you get the one extreme side that people point to that Rambam and say it's usher for women to learn Torah peh, or is it that it's usher to teach them in a certain setting, or is it only usher for a father to teach his daughter Torah, you know? And what he's saying is the way that you're gonna know the answers to these is to go through the sugya and then read the Rambam in line with the sugya, and then it'll make sense.
So saying the implications of his psak, you're not going to
Right.
necessarily understand.
Now, I think the point you were making was that there are clear cases in the Rambam, like when the Rambam says women are obligated in tefillah,
Right.
you know, like once a day, that's pretty clear, you know, or when he says that, like, you know, such and such is a malacha, that can make it clear, but there are many cases that is not clear. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Just on that point of woman, is there any way of understanding it that it's just not a field? Or is it?
I don't think there's any way to understand that one like that. Yeah.
So then, according to the Rosh, any book that was trying to achieve this objective would fail.
Yes, the Rosh says the only way to do it would really be, well, it would fail to be a standalone thing. In other words, he's also, I don't think the Rosh is saying that the Rambam's work is useless, because he's saying that because he quoted that anecdote from Barcelona, then you'd understand what the Rambam's saying. And he still might disagree with the Rambam's psak, but it's still a useful book.
But in general, a book that is independent, according to the Rosh, can never be
correct. And that's exactly what Rav Pesach said on Friday night, that the notion that you can just have like a standalone like conclusions, that you could just like read the conclusions and then just know what the halacha is. Rav Pesach seemed to be like siding with Rosh on that matter.
So wouldn't he have the same problem with Shulchan Aruch and the Mishneh Torah?
Yes, but here's the thing though, is I think people are under the mistaken impression that the Shulchan Aruch can be read and followed as halacha. And that's not what the Shulchan Aruch is supposed to be for.
But that's what we use it for.
That's what people use it for, but that's contrary to the wishes of the author.
So how would he tell you though?
Well, we're going to read that. Yeah. And the Mishneh Brura also. Yeah, Mishneh Brura also.
What's the what?
Yeah, see, this is why this is an important thing to do.
It's not a
Yeah.
book of psak.
It's not a book of psak. Yeah.
There is no book of psak according to the Rosh.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. According to the Rosh, I think you cannot have a book of psak. Yeah. Yeah.
Do other Rishonim agree with him, or is he like?
What was that?
Do other Rishonim agree with him? Is this like a?
I mean, I'm under the impression that the Rosh's shita, yeah, a standalone sefer. Yeah. Because we'll see from the Aruch HaShulchan is a book of psak, but it's a book of psak because he goes through all the sources and helps you learn everything until you get to the end halacha. You know? Yeah, Yosef.
So the Mishnah be another example, the halachic compilation where you need to know the background.
Yeah, but the Mishnah was definitely not intended. So the Mishnah was never intended to be a book of psak, and it wasn't even intended to be a standalone text for learning purposes, according to the Rambam. It was meant to be an aid to teaching the Torah path, but not something that is a standalone text. You know. For Masorah purposes, yeah, and that's why the Rambam says that like only stuff was written down that was in danger of being forgotten, and that's why he says, the example he gives that we've been through before is he says, why are there virtually no Mishnayos about tzitzis? Because everyone made tzitzis and there was no need to write it down at the time of the Mishnah, so people knew it wasn't in danger of being forgotten, Yeah, please go.
Yeah, so in support of the Russian idea of the room prayer interpreting the Rambam position in Torah, he like point to like the books that we have, Klein and whatever, and say, you see, like the fact that he's taking you through like and explaining what the Rambam is doing.
Yeah.
The fact that it means explaining.
Yeah. So that relates to the other question that you were asking, which is, did the Rambam miscalculate how clear his own words were and not think that there's going to be like this whole genre of text like interpreting the Rambam? It's hard for me to say that because the Rambam is familiar with all the works that preceded him, and that this is what happened with the Gaonim, this is what happened with the Gemara, this is what happened with the Mishnah,
Just anything, I also feel like there's this sort of a double trap going on where either he can make it easily understandable, at which point the really smart people will go there are a bunch of redundant words over here, how can we pick this apart?
Right.
Or you can try to use zero redundant words, in which case you have the opposite problem.
Right. That's like your point that you made earlier in the year, which I've quoted in your name a lot, which is that like what's clear to the Rambam is not necessarily clear to other people, but the Rambam did say that he intended for this to be clear to other people, but it's possible that there's a miss, it's like the story Johnny's. Oh, I'll call you in a second, Joseph. Sorry, I didn't see you. It's like Johnny's told the story a lot. It's a good story. I got to tell you. He said that when Johnny was in Rebbe's shiur, then they were doing a sugyos and sefer omer, and like the svara had to do with like what are you doing when you count the omer? Like, are you attaching like a number to the day, or are you like checking it off? Okay, so Johnny was like, okay, like I don't understand what Rebbe means about checking it off, So the shiur's over, Rebbe's about to leave, and Johnny says, Rebbe, he goes up to Rebbe and is like, Rebbe, can you explain what you mean by checking it off? And Rebbe goes, marking it off. And then he left, so like clearly to Rebbe, this is a clear thing, but like, yeah.
I also seems clear. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know the sugya, but yeah. Yosef, what were you gonna ask or say?
So it seems like that the Rosh can create the book of psak because he gives the limud.
That's
right?
What I think. That's why, to me, Aruch HaShulchan is and again, I'm not a psak, okay? So but Aruch HaShulchan to me is the ideal book of halacha because he gives psak on everything. He gives psak, but he goes through all the sources, shows you his reasoning, is in line with all of the other poskim in the sense that he walks you through all the generations of poskim, which is why I want to do the hakdamah. You could hear his vision from his own mouth. Yeah, to me, it's the ideal book. According to the Rosh. And even I would say, Rambam would say that, Aruch HaShulchan is doing great work. It's just that it's a lot lengthier than it needs to be because you don't need to have all the reasoning. Yeah.
Also, you switched from saying that he paskin on everything to not on everything. But the Aruch HaShulchan is the only other.
So Aruch HaShulchan did try to do what the Rambam did because he wrote. It's published in a book called Aruch HaShulchan Ha'asid, which is the Aruch HaShulchan of the future. Okay, where he paskins on issues that were not practical back then, like Shemitah and Mikdash and all this other stuff. So he does do that. I just don't factually know if he did it on everything or on just certain areas. That's why I retracted.
Gotcha. I thought he was the only other person besides the Rambam to.
He got the closest to doing what the Rambam did about writing on everything. Yeah, I just don't. I don't know. It's totally possible he did finish. I just don't know.
Gotcha.
Like Bitcoin.
Yeah, all future things. In fact, if you do Torah codes on the Rosh, you can figure out what crypto to invest in. Yeah, Isaac.
Metaverse.
You mentioned about the Mishneh Torah. I didn't quite hear what was said about that.
I didn't fully state a thing on the Mishneh Torah. I just said I made a statement of what the Mishneh Torah is not. That the Mishneh Torah also did not intend for his work to be a standalone thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What he did intend it to be, I think we'd have to go through the hakdamah of the Mishneh Torah. Yeah.
I actually asked for Petach about the Mishneh Torah, and
can we actually hold off on that just because we have an agenda here? I really want to hear it, but
yes.
This is Yeshua's last day, or not last day, but he's not gonna be here tomorrow though. So I am doing this for him. So I want. Yeah. You have a question or can we wait? Okay. All right. So hold on. There's one thing I was gonna pull out of this. The Rambam in his letter to Pinchas Hadayan does acknowledge, I think this is letter to Pinchas Hadayan, he says, as for your statement that there were a number of matters in the Mishneh Torah which seemed unclear because you could not recall their source, right? So he's saying that, so Pinchas Hadayan wrote to the Rambam saying, I don't know what you mean in the Mishneh Torah because I don't know the source, okay? So the Rambam says, this is certainly a distinct possibility for you as well as any other scholar in the world. For only a great sage like you can realize the toil that has been put into this work. Other students will imagine that it follows, okay, all right, we don't need this part. Okay, fine. Okay. She says, because of this, I regret. So this is where the Rambam does express one concession here. I regret that I did not compose along with my composition a separate volume whose content I will now explain to you and which I still hope to compose if God will decree that I will be able to do it, even though it is a very demanding task and effort. That is a source book to my composition, which will cite the source for every halacha whose origin is not evident. For example, in the case of the halachos concerning the Shabbos, there is obviously no need for me to give the source if it can be found in either of the tractates Shabbos or Eruvin. In other words, you're already, you just need to know what Masechta it's in. Like, I don't need to tell you the page number or anything like that. However, if any halacha concerning the Shabbos whose source is in the tractates of Avodah Zarah, Psakim, or Zvachim, I will cite and say that such and such a halacha in a given chapter is to be found in such and such a chapter of a given tractate. Okay, fine. So, but then there's another thing where he says that
You just passed away before you could get to this.
yeah, I think I don't know the timeline. It might be that he decided to write the more Nevuchim instead, which is also a good investment of time. Yeah, I just don't know the time frame. Hold on just 1 second. This okay. So this is the snarkiest remark against the Rosh. Okay, this is a letter that's an authentic letter from something that came from someone who interacted with Avram ben Rambam. This is from the Kara Geniza. Okay, I can give you details later. I read it a couple of Shabbos ago. He says, I will tell you something heard by me and someone else who was present with me at the school of Rabbeinu Avraham, Hakadosh V'Hakasid, that's the Rambam's son, when he responded to one of his students who knew a little Talmud and wanted to explain something in the Mishneh Torah based on the Talmud. Okay, so this is a guy who wanted to say, oh, based on the Talmud, the Mishneh Torah says blah, blah, blah. Rav Avraham responded, something like this happened to my father with a man who traveled from Cairo to Fostat to the Beis Midrash of my father of blessed memory. The man considered himself knowledgeable in Talmud, and when he arrived at the Beis Midrash, they were involved in the study of the Mishneh Torah, and my father explained it according to its simple meaning and teaching. Since this question was the subject of some statements in the Talmud man went to my father and wanted to explain the passage using the discussion in the Talmud. My father responded, if our goal is to explain the Mishneh Torah by using the Talmud, then why did we write the Mishneh Torah? In other words, the whole reason why he wrote it is that it can stand alone without the Talmud, you know, and then, sure, just one more thing though, there's the other thing also where he says, I don't know if I have it in this compilation here, where he says, if I could have condensed the entire Talmud into one chapter, then I wouldn't have done it in two, you know, like, so brevity and comprehensiveness. Yeah, what's your question?
The Rambam's goal is to make a halachic sefer, or even something that has a lesson written in the sefer. You want to figure it out me and Rosh.
Right.
So the intention unity right?
Yes, he does.
How can you possibly say even without going through the surgery? That's crazy.
He didn't
To be Medavan Davar L'Davar, meaning that if you find a case that is not explicitly addressed in the Mishneh Torah, the Rambam does expect you to be able to extrapolate based on similarities. And that, again, this is what Rav Pesach objected to, is he said, the only way to know similarities is through svara, you know, because the similarities are not on the surface features of the thing, it's from the conceptual abstract definitions.
Yeah, like he was saying that Friday night.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So this is right. So this is why, and again, I don't know what to make of this. This is a quest in progress. And if I read the book that Sean recommended, which I just purchased today, then hopefully that'll. I don't remember what it's called. It's about different philosophies of Jewish law and like what Chazal did and such and such and such. It's called something like, yeah, I'm looking at my Amazon. Christine Hayes. Yeah, it's called What's Divine About Divine Law, Early Perspectives. Yeah, I'm not endorsing it. I'm secondhand endorsing it because Sean gives good recommendations. But anyway, I have to believe that the Rambam had a different philosophy of what halacha is, such that making comparisons like that would be acceptable to him. I don't know what that philosophy is, but that's the step I'm willing to take. Okay, so I'm just going to give a nod to this. I don't think we have time to go through this, but this is in your edition of the. You don't have to even cite the source. In the Chabad Mishneh Torah, on page 31, footnote 129, he mentions that some people think that the Rosh was interpreting what the Rambam's goal was. Okay, and he cites. I tried to find the source inside. He cites the Chazon Ish as being of this opinion, and he also cites another thing which I didn't get a chance to get to, I think this is the Rebbe. I don't know if this is the Rebbe or whoever published it, says no. Like the Rosh is acknowledging that the Rambam has the opposite opinion, is hafucha lagamre, and he says adrava, to the contrary, ritzono mataraso shel Rambam haya shekatan kegado yikru v'yifsuku mitoch sifro. That Rambam's intention was that no matter how small or great you are, you can read the Mishneh Torah and paskin out of it. Okay, yeah. So see there if you need more information, and there's also in that edition of the Rambam, there's there's other stuff. Okay, but onward to our main mission of the day. Okay, good. What?
Were they contemporaries?
Who?
The Rosh.
I don't know. I think the Rosh was like one generation later. The Rosh of the Rambam. Asher ben Yechiel was 1250 to 1259, and Rambam, sorry, to 1327, 1250. That's funny. Okay, Google, you know me too well. Okay, so the Rosh was born like 46 years after the Rambam died, so they're not contemporaries. Yeah. Okay, so now let's switch gears to the Aruch HaShulchan, okay, and his hakdamah. So the reason why I'm reading this is to show you. So when Rav Pesach says like, what do you need to do in order to paskin, he gives a good description of this, and he's also going to tell us what the Shulchan Aruch was and was not doing. Okay, where did I go? Okay, so first of all, you can see there's a lot. So first of all, just facts here. This is the hakdamah to Choshen Mishpat, because the Aruch HaShulchan wrote Choshen Mishpat first before Orach Chaim. So if you want to find the hakdamah, it's in Choshen Mishpat. Yeah. So the Shulchan Aruch was written by Rav Yosef Karo in the 1500s. I always forget when Yosef Karo lived. Yeah, Yosef Karo. Probably written in the 1500s. Yeah, 1488 to 1578. And the Aruch HaShulchan was written by Shulchan Yechiel Michal Epstein, who lived in not that Epstein, no relation, 1829 to 1908. Okay, and so that's what? Relatively new, yeah, correct. Now, in terms of what the difference is, that we'll see. Okay, so I do recommend reading the first 2/3 of this hakdamah, because he goes through like the history of Torah and Torah Sheba'al Peh and like stuff, and a lot of good stuff here. But we want to get down to the nuts and bolts for our question here. When he says, so the immediate context is he goes through the whole idea of Elu v'Elu Divrei Elokim Chaim. Like, how can you have two different people who have a machlokus and both of them are true? Oh, I got to tell you where this is in your edition if you want to follow along. Can I see that? I don't know if it's going to be the same here. It's a paragraph that should begin with the omnam. Yeah, omnam.
What's the
This is the
Aruch HaShulchan. Yeah. Omnam kol zeh lepilpul haTorah. Yeah. Okay. So he says all of this, in terms of there being different valid opinions, is regarding the analysis of Torah. Okay. Pilpul is like a word for analysis. Depending on the context, it has different connotations. But for practical halacha, lo kol adam zocha lishov mayim chaim lahalacha ulamase mehayam hagadol hazeh. Not every person merits to draw the living waters for halacha and for action from mehayam hagadol hazeh, from this great sea. Due to its great quality and quantity. He was a conceptual thinker. No, okay, I mean, he was, but not because of those words. Okay, so in other words, not everyone can like draw halachic conclusions from the Talmud. Ilazos nisoru rabosenu hakadmonim lazeh, and for this reason, our early rabbis were motivated towards this end. V'yish shekitzruhu kamo Rabbeinu Hagadol Harav Elfazal. Shout out Yosef. There are some people who are very concise, like the Rif. Okay, so just background info. What did the Rif do? What was his style of writing? Also psak halacha, but in a weird way. Not weird, but
just give blanket statements of the Gemara.
Yeah, he omitted from the Gemara all statements that we don't paskin like, and just left and all non-practical things and all agarita. Yeah, and just left like the raw halacha, and then sometimes he'll add a couple words. Yeah.
So what about like when it comes to like us going through like a certain section of like what's it good? It seems to be almost like the only way you can be taught is through agarita, like the cover, like give it all away kind of thing. How would he?
So
what have you left to-
that gets into the thorny question of what do you consider agadata and what do you consider halacha and what, and
So he
so
might include things that some people might still consider.
so that is exactly how you find out from him, like what he considers to be halacha and not. Yeah. Okay. So just historical background: the Rif lived from 1013 to 1103. Okay, so before the Rambam.
And Rashi?
And Rashi was around that time, right? Rashi was a little bit after 1040 to 1105. Yeah. Okay. So so he's in the Rif, Rabbeinu Harash Zal were concise. Okay. Others wrote all the halachos in each halacha like the Rambam. Okay, they call him the Nesher Gadol, the great eagle. I never knew where he got that name from. Rabbeinu Yaakov Baal HaTurim, and Yaakov Baal HaTurim is the Tur. Okay. However, due to the abundance of opinions, Amdu Shnei Gedolei Hador, the two Gedolim of the generation arose. Yosef HaTzadik uMoshe Ish Elokim. Okay, now that's code word for Yosef Karo and the Ramah. Okay, but he's borrowing phrases from like Yosef HaTzadik and Moshe Rabbeinu. V'chibru chiburim gedolim b'kamus uve'ekus al sifrei hatur, and they wrote books of tremendous quantity and worth on the books of the Tur. Okay, so then the Tur was the Rosh's son. Okay, the Tur was the Rosh's father. Sorry, Yaakov ben Asher, 1270 through 1340. Sorry, that's the Rosh. Sorry, hold on just a second here. Let's get these. Okay. The Rosh, what am I saying? Yaakov Baal HaTurim was the author of the Tur was 1269 to 1343. Okay, that's the Tur. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Good. So yeah. Popular Shavit. Okay, so what did they do? Okay, so he says like this: Beis Yosef v'Darchei Moshe. So the two works on the Tur are the Beis Yosef and or Beit Yosef, if you want to be like that, and the Darchei Moshe. Okay, that's on the Tur. All right. Shema ba'u b'mishpat al kol chiluki hadeos miravasin Rishonim. So what they did is they sorted out all the opinions of the Rishonim, all the Malchus Rishonim. Okay. Rabbeinu Baal Beis Yosef pasak lahalacha kishnaim mishloshas haroim. Harif Haramam Varash. This is a famous formula for how the Rav Yosef Karo Paskin. He Paskined 2 out of 3 among the 3 great ones, the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. So his first, and there are other rules, but the main rule was he would look at the 3 and then go with 2 out of 3. In rare cases, he'd Paskin with minority, and then weigh in like with other Rishonim, like the Ramban, and I forgot who else.
The Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh?
And the Rosh, yeah.
You're saying in the rare cases he goes minority and mean 1 out of it.
Yeah, like let's say, I think the cases were, let's say you have the Rif and the Rambam, and so in the 2 out of 3 thing, they're the majority. Let's say the majority of other Rishonim agree with minority opinion, then I think he would go with minority.
And that's why he brings it to show why he's essentially going with that.
I think so. Yeah. Okay. Since in the majority of cases the Rif and the Rambam follow one opinion because they're both broadly speaking, it's not strictly speaking Sephardic, but like they're different from the Ashkenazic lands because the Rif was in North Africa and the Rambam was also in North Africa.
The Rif taught the Rambam's teacher, the Rambam's dad's teacher.
Yeah, the Rimigash, and the Rimigash taught Rav Maimon, and the Rav Maimon taught the Rambam. Yeah, that's right. That's another reason why they're the same, or why they're often going to be the same. The Harush, so since the Rambam and the Rif are often in one opinion, the Harush zal halach b'deosav al pi rov achrei rabbasin hatzarfatim balei tosfos, and since the Rosh, in many of his own opinions, follow the balei tosfos, okay, in France, l'chein Rabbeinu Harama nata birov hadinim achrei rabbasin hatzarfatim b'hashkenazim. Therefore, the Rama was inclined in many of his psak to follow the French and German rabbis, okay. She'anu mi b'nei b'neihem, that we are descendants of, the Aruch Shulchan.
When you said balei tosfos in France,
yeah,
that means literally like their school goes all the way back to Tosfos.
Well, the balei tosfos that he's talking about are the ones you learn in the Gemara. That's the same one. And those were over like a couple hundred years. Yeah, there were like lots of them. Yeah. Okay. Umizeh chibru hashulchan hatahor lifnei Hashem. So the what do you call it? The Beis Yosef authored the Shulchan Hatahor Lifnei Hashem, Shulchan Aruch. Ki kulo zahav tahor, all of it is pure gold. Vayikach Moshe es atmosav shel Yosef hatzadik. He's doing biblical puns here. Or he says Moshe took the bones of Yosef hatzadik, the hichnis devarav b'soch divrei Rabbeinu habeis Yosef, and he inserted his words into the words of the Beis Yosef. So that's the style of in the Shulchan Aruch. You have the Rama could have written his own book, but he made the decision to write it as a gloss or a commentary to the Shulchan Aruch to integrate them into one book. Ushneim ke'achad banu es kol beis Yisrael b'dinim hanahugim b'zman hazeh. Both of them together built the entire house of Israel for the laws that we rely on. He's a good writer. It's nice and poetic. Yeah. Okay. Now here's the key phrase. This is going to correct your opinion of whether Shulchan Aruch is and isn't. Okay. Ula asher lo haiza kavanasam sheyifsoku mitocha kitzur, since the Ramah and the Beis Yosef did not want you to paskin based on their concise formulations of the halacha. So the Maharsha, who is the same Maharsha on the back of the Gemara, here's what he writes. He says, "Ubedoros halalu, in our generations, osan shemorim halacha mitocha shulchan aruch, people who paskin out of the shulchan aruch, v'harihim inam yodim tam ha'inin shel kol davar, and they don't know the reasoning behind everything. Im lo yedaktiku b'davar mitchila b'socha Talmud, unless they first scrutinize the matter from the Talmud, shu shimush tamid chachamim, which is what we call shimush tamid chachamim, which means like figuring out all the svaras and reasoning of the chachamim." He says, "V'taus nafal b'hara'asam b'harahin bichlal balet mevale olam." He says these people are going to make mistakes, and they are among the destroyers of the world, which Rav Pesach quoted the Gemara that says people who paskin based on the Mishnah are destroyers of the world. So he's applying that to people who paskin out of the Shulchan Aruch are destroyers of the world. V'ish ligor behen, and you should rebuke them. Okay. So he's saying you should tell people not to do this, right? He says, "V'chein kasav hagaon bal Tosfos Yom Tov b'hakdamah l'chibur b'madani Yom Tov v'zeh l'shano." So Tosfos Yom Tov, who was he's mostly known for being a commentator on the Mishnah, wrote in his hakdamah to Madani Yom Tov, he says, "Va'af harav hagadol moreno harav Yosef Karozal," even the great Rabbi Yosef Karo, asher hishbir bar b'sifro Beis Yosef, who supplied the world with his book, the Beis Yosef, mitocha asa hachibur shekaro shulchan aruch b'demuso v'tzalmo shel sefer haturim, and he composed a book in the same form and likeness of the sefer haturim, v'al lashon tamid lashon haramam zal, and always quoted the Rambam. Lo niskaben lahoros mitoch sifro chalila v'chalila milach shel alav kazos. He says he never intended for you to paskin out of the Shulchan Aruch. God forbid that he would think this.
And that's what we did.
That's what a lot of people do. I mean, again, I don't think real poskim paskin out of the Shulchan Aruch because they know all the other halachos,
Right,
but the average Jew is going to open the Shulchan Aruch and paskin out of it,
Sorry, so what was it written for then?
I'll say that in a second because I don't think he says this. Oh, he says, wait. Rav mi shelamad ba'ayin b'sefer haturim im pirush Beis Yosef, only for someone who has learned in depth in the tour with the commentary of the Beis Yosef, v'yila limtzo tachlis kol din v'din, and is struggling to find the ultimate halacha, halo yadu v'yavinu mitocha shulchan aruch. Then he can get it from the Shulchan Aruch. Zos haisa kavnaso haritzuya. This is the proper intent. So let me just summarize this, and then I'll answer Yosef's question. So what the Beis Yosef is the main work. Beis Yosef brings down all of the Gemaras and Rishonim on the tour to walk you through the sugya. But yeah, it's the predecessor to the Aruch HaShulchan, really. You should call it the Yosef HaBeis. No, that's a dumb joke. So, but then let's say you learn the Beis Yosef and you're like, I don't know what we follow the halacha. So then you look at the Shulchan Aruch and it's like, this is the summary, but you're not, if you just look at the Beis Yosef, if you just look at the Shulchan Aruch without the Beis Yosef, then you're missing all the reasoning and then you're not going to pass them correctly. Yeah, Yosef? Levine?
No, never mind. My question was just what the difference between the Beis Yosef was.
Okay. Yeah, Yeshua?
Yeah, so if someone doesn't know what to do and they don't have the Rav near them or a Rav near them who's qualified for psak, what are they supposed to do?
That's a good question, which I'm not going to take up right now. Okay. Yeah. All right. I want to finish this in time because you have to leave right at 2:30, right? Okay. Mitam zeh kam hagaon hagadol Rabbi Mordechai Yafe v'chibur sefer halabush. Now, just listen, by the way, to the proliferation. So this is also what I wanted to read here about what you need to do. Someone asked also in the Q&A, what do you need to do in order to know how to paskin? And Rav Pesach said, in addition to going through all the sources, you need to do chuvos to know how the halachic system works. Here are going to be the main players you need to know. And here's the thing: if you've never heard of some of these people, so then that's a sign. Right, yeah, exactly. So he says, so Mordechai Yafe, Mordechai Yafo, authored the Sefer Halavush. V'hitim ma'at b'maskius divrei Rabbeinu bali hashulchan aruch. Okay. So then the other achronim arose. Here they are. They wrote other books on the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. Kamo Hasma, V'hadrisha V'haprisha, V'habach. Okay, so those are on the Torah. V'taz V'shach, V'magin Avram, V'chelkas Mechokik, V'habeis Shmuel, V'haolas Tamid, V'habeis Hillel, V'urim V'tumim, Unesivos HaMishpat, Uktos HaChoshen, V'pri Chadash, V'pri Torah, V'hatavus Shor, V'pri Megadim, V'halavush Srad, V'od Kama Chiburim Migdole Olam, Heim B'chiburim, Heim B'shelos Uchuvos. And remember, this is only up until 1928, or I mean earlier than that probably, because there were more who came who were like contemporaries of of the Aruch Shulchan or later. Hadar hachashash v'bilbul l'mukobos. So, but then he says, but because of all these people, the confusion returned to its place. So now you get lost in a sea of achronim. Okay. Ubifrat bedor hashafel hazeh, especially in this generation, shnismatu lomdei haTorah ba'abasin harabim, where the Yeridas hadoros. No, he doesn't say that. Where we have a lot of sins in our generation. And now he says what he did. Alkein kamdim nis odadati. It's probably supposed to be nis orarti. Does yours say nis orarti or nis odadati? Oh, fine. Okay, there you go. So I arose and I motivated myself. Ani hatzayir lebeis Levi. I, the young Levite. All the best chachamim are Leviim, not all of them, but many of them. I mean, I always like whenever I find someone who's a Levi, I'm not surprised. That's why I've composed this. I've arranged the table with all sorts of delicacies. I started with Choshen Mishpat, ki amok hu lashis ayin al kol divrei Rabbeinu achronim hamukim b'harchavim, because it's very hard to get the depths of all the achronim. V'negazeh b'chelak hasheni nichsarnu min imus digreim b'chol ma'ayan haya b'chelak harishon. And he says also everyone learns the first chelak of the Shulchan Aruch, which is Orach Chaim. So he's like, we got to go, balance it out. V'shama nichli kar nirchav lihispachba. So here's what he's going to do in his book. Okay, I'm sorry I'm going through this fast, but I want to complete it today. We can always talk about it later. This is what I intend to do. 1. I explain all the words of the Shulchan Aruch with reasons and analysis. 2. Whenever any of the achronim differ with the Shulchan Aruch, I bring their opinions with their reasoning and all the new halachos they introduced. Yeah.
Does it mean the mechaber or mechaber plus Rama?
The mechaber or the
mechaber or the mechaber plus Rama?
I think mechaber plus the Rama. Okay. Yeah. 3. B'makom sheish machlokas bein Rabbeinu ha'achronim be'besi deosem. When there is a machlokas achronim, and I bring their opinions. And if I have a way to make a decision about it, I will not hesitate to write my own decision and how I arrived at it. And the people who are learning my book, you can choose which one. Okay, so he's writing his decision about the achronim, but he's not forcing it on anyone. 4. In many places, when when the people disagree with the reviews of Kara and the Ramah, and I can defend them or resolve their words. I will do so. So he's going to defend the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. In many places where there are questions on the Rambam, and you need to analyze the words of the people who explain the Rambam, or the people who explain the Shulchan Aruch. I will answer the questions on the Rambam and explain them. So he's writing this as a Rambam commentary also to answer questions on the Rambam. 6. Od harbe dinim mechudashim shematzasi b'soch divrei Rabbeinu harishonim shlohu v'u adayin b'havesim. Laws of the Rishonim that were not included in halachic works, I will bring down as well. Or other new laws that come from svara or other pieces of evidence. I will not refrain from revealing them. nearly. He says, but when I say like my own svaras and stuff or these new opinions, I'll say it seems to me, so you know that it's not one of these earlier sources. 7 b'chol makom shelo kasavti makor sheshafti mimeno. Any place? Oh, this is a cool. Oh no, not yet. Any place where I do not write a source that I drew my words from, Yeda Hama'ayan Shazehu Midivrei Rabbeinu Bali HaShulchan Aruch. You should know that these are from the authors of the Shulchan Aruch. Ach Hirchavti Hadvarim B'Halachasa B'Taima. But I've gone on and expanded it with the reasons. B'Cholasher Midivrei Harishonim B'Achronim Shlohu B'Shulchan Aruch Kasavti B'Koro B'Shnei Chatzai Merubim Kazeh. Anything that is brought from the Rishonim the Achronim that is not cited in the Shulchan Aruch, I wrote with 2 square brackets like this. Okay, leprakim kishal number 8. Leprakim kishal yedei hadvarim niskadish eze chidush b'gemara or barashi b'tosfos or b'shar rishonim. In many places, if there's a chidush to me in explaining a gemara or Rashi or Tosfos or other rishonim, ramazti hadvarim b'milos muatos. I alluded to it in few words, behekef shnei chatzai merubim kinizkar la'el, in 2 brackets. So if you've ever learned the Aruch Shulchan and you see that he has like bracketed stuff and you're like, why does he have brackets there? It's because these are not chidushim lahalacha necessarily. They're chidushim on explaining the Gemara or like mafarshim. Shemibnei shekol kavnasi l'hoyel libli lavo ba'arucha huchrachti lasos kain v'hamayan yavin mishlo yirtza la'ayin b'zeh ein b'zeh miniyam b'ikar hadvarim. He says, if you don't want to look into this, you can skip it. Okay, so you can, he says it's just like side points if you want to learn the Gemara more. Lufamim hebesi eze din mechudash miyushami o mitosafta. Okay, sometimes I'll bring stuff from these other Tanaitic sources, as long as there's no stira. Sometimes I'll mention that our Shas doesn't go like it. 9, this is the 2 more. So this is where he says he's going to write other halachas that are not practiced nowadays. Okay, fine. Okay, so I'm not going to read through that. He's bringing in halachas that we don't like. He says Sanhedrin, Drisha v'Chakira, these other halachas that are not practical in Bizman Hazeh. And 10, Zed Darchi B'dinim Elu. This is my way in these laws. Mikor hamakoros lezeh divrei hanesher gadol haRambam zal. This is a very interesting thing also. My primary source is the Rambam's words. Okay. In other words, he's going to give precedence to quoting from the Rambam when he introduces an area. Okay. And you'll see, and this is why, by the way, if you have ever wondered why I quote the Aruch Shulchan so much in Rambam Bekius, it's not just because I like him, it's because he often does present things through the Mishneh Torah. So it's a good Achronim compendium to the Mishneh Torah. When Rashi and Tosfos differ from the Rambam, or when the Raiva disagrees with the Rambam, then I'll quote their opinion as Yesh Omrim. So he's going with the Rambam as primary, but then Yesh Omrim is these other people who disagree. I'll quote the source in the brackets. And I will allude to my chidushim in a concise way. Yeah, okay. And then he goes on and davens to Hashem that he be successful here. Yeah. Okay, so again, just to summarize here, so in terms of Rav Pesach, and I think this is true to Rav Pesach and the Rosh, that I think if the Aruch Shulchan read this to the Rosh or read this to Rav Pesach and said, and the Aruch Shulchan said, am I doing the right thing? Both of them would flash him a thumbs up, and say like, yeah, this is how psak should work. Rav Pesach would add that you actually need to like learn through all the sources, like learn through all the chuvas and stuff, but I think that they would agree that like this is how psak should be done. And then in terms of the moral of the story for us is I think if you want a walkthrough through an entire sugya and emerge with a halacha l'maisa, then the Aruch Shulchan I think nothing better than Aruch Shulchan, And I'll just read from the this was a short little article here. Aruch Shulchan, Mishneh Torah. Do you guys have Rabbi Ari Enkin in Migdal? You did not? Okay. He taught in Migdal at a certain point. What did you say?
Do you actually need, when you say like just like he cites the stuff, I'm guessing you still need to go to the actual
So he'll usually bring down almost all of it like verbatim. I mean, I think he'll tell you if you need to go in more, but I think he really it is a set table in the sense that he provides everything for you. So just on the last word, which is kind of going to address Isaac's thing, but it's with a bias here.
You sent this to the what's it called chat?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah. So this is Rabbi Ari Enkin, who writes on halachic stuff. The title is Mishnah Berurah versus Aruch HaShulchan. He says, I've got some musings that have been on my mind that I'd like to share. I don't know if it's just me, but it seems that the Aruch HaShulchan just doesn't get the full measure of attention or authority that it deserves. It often seems as if there is a popularity contest between the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan. Although not completely accurate, perhaps the state of affairs can be summarized as follows. The yeshivish world follows the Mishnah Berurah almost exclusively, while much of the learned non-yeshivish world, I'm just gonna say that again, the learned non-yeshivish world, okay, which we would be in that category, right? Our yeshiva would be in that category, yeah.
Zag always says yeshivish, does it mean yeshivish or yeshivish and chassidim?
I think yeshivish. Yeah, I think it means yeshivish.
Okay, so chassidim follow the Aruch HaShulchan.
I think the Chassidim follow, well, like Lubavitch follows the Shulchan Aruch Harav. You know, they follow their own halachos. I don't think he's even talking about Chassidim. Much of the learned non-yeshivish world defers to the Aruch HaShulchan. This is quite odd, actually, considering that the Aruch HaShulchan is a Lithuanian work, while the Mishnah Berurah is a Polish one. I don't know why that's odd. While I certainly, I guess maybe because of Litvish and Yeshivish, while I certainly don't want to marginalize the Mishnah Berurah, I would, however, like to discuss why the Aruch HaShulchan should be considered the posik acharon in a dispute between it and the Mishnah Berurah. The Aruch HaShulchan is probably the most thorough and conveniently organized compilation of halacha today. Every halachic issue opens with a presentation of the relevant scriptural and Talmudic sources. So too, unlike the Mishnah Berurah's text-based tradition to deciding halacha, the Aruch HaShulchan tries to determine the halacha based on Talmudic precedents and contemporary practice, and often works hard to satisfy both. It's not since the Rambam that there has been a work of halacha that covers all of Jewish law like the Aruch HaShulchan does. So I guess he does do that. And by the way, when Rav Pesach was saying read through tshuvos to get a sense of how to paskin, you're not going to get that from the Mishnah Berurah, not because he was lacking in it, but because he didn't write the Mishnah Berurah for that purpose. But the Aruch HaShulchan will talk you through. He'll say, like, this is the sugya, but everyone in the community does something different. So how can we, reconcile that? So which do we follow, the Mishnah Berurah or the Aruch HaShulchan? Rabbi Yehuda Henkin cites his grandfather, Rabbi Yosef Eliyahu Henkin, as having ruled that the Aruch HaShulchan is the more definitive and authoritative decisor of halacha. He offers a number of reasons for this. One reason is that because most of the Aruch HaShulchan was written after the Mishnah Berurah. In fact, Aruch HaShulchan often cites the Mishnah Berurah before issuing his own ruling. Another reason why the Aruch HaShulchan should be considered more authoritative is because it covers the entire Shulchan Aruch, while the Mishnah Berurah only covers the Orach Chaim section. So too, which is 1/4 of it. So too, as mentioned, the Aruch HaShulchan also takes into account the common customs of his day before rendering a ruling. Finally, the Mishnah Berurah was essentially written by a scholar, meaning like an academic, a scholar, while the Aruch HaShulchan was written by a scholar who was also a practicing rabbi, like in a community. As a practicing rabbi, the author regularly interacted with the community and dealt with the problems and issues that they faced. He had more hands-on experience in dealing with halachic dilemmas. Indeed, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein is reported to have said that the Aruch HaShulchan takes precedence over the Mishnah Berurah for this reason alone. So that's his take on it. Now, if you want a contrary take, I'm not going to cite this, but Rav Hershel Schachter had scathing words about the Aruch HaShulchan, so much so that I'm not even going to try to repeat them because I feel like it's lashon hara if it's coming from someone like me and not. Yeah, I'll have to find where it is. I think I posted it earlier in the year. Rav Hershel Schachter. Yeah. Okay, so that's hopefully an informative crash course in so we still have left unresolved, by the way. How can the Rambam think that it's possible to write the Mishneh Torah? And if it weren't for the fact that the Rambam was such a chacham gadol, I would be skeptical about, if someone else said they're going to do it, then I'd be like, dream on, But the Rambam knew halacha, and everyone who learns the Rambam, even those who disagree with him, know that he knows halacha. So what did he think? Isaac, if this is an extremely quick question, I have to give someone a ride to a train.
Yeah, can you stop the recording?
Yeah. Stop recording.